executive director of your neighbors to the west. It literally took me less than 10 minutes to get here, so I mean I'm right off Lane Avenue, so we're practically neighbors. I want to start with a story that talks about my first meeting up with public history, and it takes me back to when I went to graduate school. As part of my financial aid package, I was going to be a teaching assistant, they told me. Now, I went to a really small, you'd laugh, I had 500 people graduate with me from college, so very small undergraduate school. We didn't have teaching assistants. I didn't even know what one did or what they were, but that's what I was going to be in graduate school. And I was going to help in the Introduction to Labor History class, which I had taken one class in that a few years before, so I guess, sort of I knew that. And I went for my first meeting with the professor, who obviously was a PhD in labor history, and I sat next to the other teaching assistant, who was a PhD candidate in labor history. And I thought, oh boy, I'm way over my head in a job I don't know and a subject I'm not too sure of. So I reached out to my mom, because moms are good for that, and she's a math teacher in high school, and I just said, hey, I just need some tips here. How do I manage these students? So through that and the fact that I was a good student, that's the way I conducted my TA sessions. Friday mornings, I had 3 back-to-back, and so it came time for the first exam, and I just figured, well, we're going to play a game, we're going to pretend these are questions on the test, and we'll go over the answers. I don't know what to do, so that made sense to me. And what do you know? Some of the questions that I had presented in my sessions were actually on the test. Literally didn't know it was going to be that way, but that's what happened. And so after that, there were a lot of students who were requesting to be in my sessions for the TAs, not the other. And whereas the other TA really knew his history, I was doing the public part. I was giving the public what they wanted along with the history. And so that's when I'm here. I find myself in a bit of the same situation today. My background is not history. I was an applied math major, undergrad, and I went to graduate school for human resources. I have my master's in that, and I worked for 13 years in that. Through family obligations and moving around, I've done a variety of different things, and when I landed here, my kids were in middle school and high school, and I was that mom who was very involved with things at school, met up with the executive director of the Historical Society, and she pulled me in. So I was a volunteer, and then a board member, and then assistant director, and now I've been executive director since September. So mine has been a process of learning and really paying attention to that public piece of the pie. So let's see if we can forward here. Oop. How do I go forward? I thought maybe I'd click, but yes. No, you're good. So just the space bar then.
Just the space bar.
Okay. We have to have it technical.
I can actually run it for you if you like. Don't need to stay up here.
That's okay. I don't have that many slides. You relax. So being the math major, organized person that I am, I like to kind of show you what I wanted to cover today and get it straight in my own head. I want to talk to you a little bit about the society. And then I just want to tell you some stories about some current projects we have going on. And I separated them into 3 buckets. There's times where we're called upon, and that's wonderful. You want to be an organization that gets asked to do things. There are times where we create the projects ourselves because we think it's a good idea. And there are times where something crops up that really needs to be dealt with. And so we have to get on that and deal with it. So I have 3 different examples. What I'm trying to do during my tenure is that we're making Upper Arlington's history relevant to today and engaging for the people in our community. Because the more they participate and look to us to provide services, the more, the better it is for us. And then just a few words of advice and some QA. So before I move on, let's little bit about us. We were founded in 1976, kind of grew out of the bicentennial celebration. We've had a couple major projects happen. I don't know if you're aware, we do have a historic district within Upper Arlington to the south. It is recognized for its 20th century revival style architecture, the diversity that exists within those homes from 1915 to 1940. And so the Historical Society people worked on that, and we got listed on the National Register in 1985. We were part of a project in 2010 where they had a barn that actually existed within the Upper Arlington limits in the 1830s is when it was built. And it came down because the property was sold and stored, and the Historical Society worked hand in hand with the city as well as other community organizations to get wood from that barn put into the Amelito Murillo barn. It is something under our Parks and Recs division now where people can have events. So it's an event barn. So there's some history in there. And just as a side note, they had extra wood left over, which finally Parks and Rec called me last fall. Talk about things cropping up. They're like, we got to get rid of this wood. It's taking up too much room. We got to do something with it. And it's a big pallet. So I thought, well, my daughter took wood shop at the high school. Maybe the wood shop teacher at the high school wants this wood, and the students could work on it, and we make ornaments every year. Maybe they can make some ornaments from us from this historic barn wood. So we're in the middle of that process right now. The Parks and Rec got rid of the wood. It's now sitting at the high school, and we're working through how the students can help us do that. So they're pretty excited to work with that historic wood. And then just recently for our centennial, because we turned 100 in 2018, we had this history book written, an updated book with more story-like and lots of pictures. So this was a huge project with lots of donors and to get that produced. We are an independent nonprofit organization. And in the middle there is our mission. I'll let you read that. We often say discover, preserve, and celebrate. Those are kind of our key words. And then in thinking about everyone that we're responsible to, there's a lot. We have myself and the board, and then we have a small group of probably about a dozen kind of permanent volunteers. We have our members that give us money. We are not part of the city, and so to get money, people need to donate to us. So our sponsors of our events, community businesses, and on and on. So we have a lot of people that we have to pay attention to. So let's talk about the first project that is currently going on in our community. This is one where I got an email, and I opened it up from the Education Foundation. And this is last fall, and they say, hey, Jones Middle School, which used to be our high school. Jones Middle School was built in 1924, and the high school then was in 1956, the other one opened. So that's when Jones became a middle school. Jones called these composite pictures, this is class of 1936, they have them through 1956. These composite pictures, they're getting water damaged, pictures are falling out, the little people are falling, they need some help. So they've gotten a quote, they want to digitize them, refurbish them, reframe them, hang them up, and oh, by the way, the Education Foundation doesn't think this is really part of their mission, and so we're handing it to you, and it's going to be $10,000. Okay, well, that's easy because I don't have $10,000, so that's an easy answer. I can't do that. So what can we do is always kind of the mantra. What can we work on? So I went and met with the principal at Jones Middle School to say, what's really going on? What are your needs? And not only do they have 26 of these composites lining the walls on the second floor of Jones, they've got 40 of these collages. It's called Tradition Hall. You see Jack Nicholas has got to be our most famous graduate out of UA. I assume you know who he is. Okay. And so we have 40 of these, and oh, by the way, those are falling off the wall, and the glass shatters, and it sounds like a gunshot. And so we really can't have that happening either. Okay. And oh, by the way, we'd really like to have our wall space back. We've got all these old white people, to be honest, staring at us. And we've got a tradition hall that had inductions in 73, 83, and 93. And then it ceased. So hearing her needs, we talked about ways forward, and so just to make this kind of brief, we got other people involved. The Education Foundation, because they reached out to us. The Alumni Association, because it deals with alumni. The library, because they house digital images for us. The school communications officer, because it's a school's issue, the principal at Jones, and then myself. And so we've been meeting somewhat regularly to talk about what we're going to do. So briefly, and this is the little bit of the hush-hush because we have not really told the community about our path forward yet. We're in process of coming up with that. I have logged in a ginormous composite picture to the Columbus Metropolitan Library. Well, they have one of 3 scanning machines in North America that can like scan these huge pictures. So we just did a test of that last week to see if we can scan through the glass, and we can, and it turns out really well. So our plan is to take these down, scan all of it, take the composites out of their frames and store them because otherwise they're too big to store. And then try to reach out to families to give them back their collages. Create a plaque in place of all of these things so that these people are not forgotten because, you know, we're taking down an award that they got. And yeah, putting it all up so it can be publicly available. So just those few minor steps. We're trying to work through how we can do this in a way that everybody can get behind and understand and be thankful and appreciative of. So that's one project that's going on. The next one is one we created ourselves. And this stemmed out of a field trip to German Village. They were just launching their Brickline signs. I don't know if you're familiar with those. They have these wonderful, about this large signs that have a picture and then some words about the building that they're on, the history of the building that they're on. And of course, German Village, everything's right at the sidewalk, so it's really easy to see. And you know, I got to thinking, why can't we do something like that in our neck of the woods? And so I started to go around and take pictures of all our historical signs. Well, we have quite a few. We have like 30 or 40 around our community, whether they're Ohio history signs or plaques at the Emelito Murillo Barn that explain things, or the National Register plaques. And I thought, there's a way we need to just take what we have and like put it together and make it look like it's, you know, all connected. So we met with some city officials, and there had been some talk about doing something like this, and we ended up working with the city on this UA History Trail project. And the city paid for these lovely little markers that they would then drop in the locations, and also just said they would create the website. We just need to feed content to them. So this was all trucking really well, and then we had pandemic, and the city had other things to do. There were a few other priorities that took precedence, and then we've had some people who've worked on it who have some health issues, so it's kind of stagnated, but it is definitely there and available to us to pick up and continue on with. So, so that's another thing that is, and it really never ending. And then the last one, this is a map. Here's Arlington Avenue from 1933. And this is a project that we kind of got pulled into because we felt a need from the community. This is Lane Avenue. You see these lines. This is the boundaries of Upper Arlington in 1933. They're kind of goofy. And we have recently rediscovered our freed slave that lived on the land where our high school is. I don't know if you've heard this story. Just really briefly, in the 1830-ish time frame, Pleasant Litchford made his way from Virginia after buying his freedom and settled where our high school is today. Had about 227 acres of land, so he was a major landowner and a major person in the Columbus's history in terms of Second Baptist Church founder, etc. It's not a history that we've talked about a lot in Upper Arlington, and so it kind of got hidden, if you will, and reemerged with the publication of a book by two ladies who self-published in 2017-ish. So it kind of came to the forefront. And what I want to point out, Fanny Litchford is one of the last Litchford relatives that was in Upper Arlington. This is 1933, living right on the boundaries. And within our borders, it's not a secret that we had restrictions on types of people who could live there. And we were in meetings and people were talking about, saying very broad statements about this topic, about who could live in Upper Arlington. Oh, the city passed laws saying, you know, there's no of this kind or this kind or this kind of people. And I was like, that just doesn't feel right. I don't know what the right answer is. And we found out that no one had ever really summarized what happened in our history around this topic. And so we felt compelled to go and do some research ourselves to sort of have everybody talk about the facts. The facts aren't great, but at least if we're all talking about the facts, then we can all start there and move on. So we looked at our property deeds, and really just in a nutshell for you guys, we found that although they started selling homes in 1914, it was 1926 when the first restriction went into a property deed. And I think that's because there was a related Supreme Court case. But in 1926, they wrote out that blacks could not own property in Upper Arlington, in people's property deeds. And that was the case until 1948 when that became unenforceable. So, and then there was some other business going on with the Northwest Association in a small portion of Upper Arlington that kept that going in through about 1970. So it's not a, wonderful part of our history, but it was good to get in and get those facts, and it's on our website if you want to read about it at uahistory.org under the Learn tab. We have everything that we've found, and we've been able to, it's helped the city, it's helped Equal UA, which is an organization that's trying to increase the diversity in Upper Arlington. It's helped a lot of people to start from this common ground and have that discussion. So, that is that. So some things about, kind of wrap up, some things about being relevant and engaging. We started this, we did it for the second time this year. This is so fun. This is, our people that come to our events, they tend to be older, okay? That's the kind of the population that we talk to. So it's like, how can we engage other types of people in our community? So we have this little scavenger hunt. It's just a scavenger hunt for information. We don't hide things. But we give clues like this. And of course, you know, I was a math major, so I like the math. So ones that families can do together. So if you know the address of our municipal services center and you take it from, so we're trying to teach them history, but while they're doing something else fun. And then we send them somewhere, and then they send us pictures. And then I get to use pictures all year long of all these people having fun with history. It works out great. We get people to donate prizes. So that's been a really, we had 25 teams participate this year. So yeah, it's a free activity that we offer. So that's been great. And then the other thing we started last year, and we will do again this August, is we have this Homes of History program. If your home is 100 years old and has not significantly changed the exterior facade, the front has not changed, you can get a sign and be part of celebrating the wonderful preservation work that you're doing for your home. And so, boy, people, they love their home. And so this was a very popular program, and again, hit kind of a different population than we might otherwise see. So those have been two very successful things that board members thought up, so that's wonderful. So just kind of quickly then, obviously, you know, you are all history buffs and everything, which is great, but take the different opportunities, learn the languages, do other things, because you really don't know what's going to be helpful to you in your job. Create meaningful networks. I find that reaching out to a bunch of people and having us all work together as a team, which I know is a focus of probably how you do your work here, has just been really helpful. And then be grateful always to folks, especially those who are giving you money. Just quick, we are doing a couple of talks in the fall. So on September 14th, which is a Wednesday, we're having John Lowe come from OSU Newark, and he's going to talk to us about the Native Americans who were on our lands prior to us. And then also related to OSU, your stadium turns 100 in October. And Howard Dwight Smith lived in UA, and he's the one who designed that lovely building. So we've been working with his family members, which has been a blast, to create kind of a really family-centric, you'll all do all the stadium stuff here. We'll concentrate on the man and his family and his, what he left and the buildings he created. So we're excited about that. And there's my sponsors, I have to get that in, thank you to them, and then that's me, and that's my information, so thank you. I don't know if you want to do questions or at the end? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Just for starters, I love the idea of being able to put a little marker on your house, like, oh, I live in a historic site. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you.
But my question has to do with your first project,
okay.
Preservation of these, I guess, artifacts or historical items. How exactly does that process begin? Do they have to reach out to you, like in the case of the high school? Can you seek these institutions or whatever have, you know, are holding on to these pieces out, or do they need to come to you first?
So no one ever has to come to us. So that's, you want to be out there and at meetings and aware and have people know who you are so that they do contact us, in our situation anyway. Because of our relationship with the city and the schools and the library, we're able to kind of work that, and we could make suggestions, but in this case, we're finding that win-win-win-win spot for everybody. That's what I'm hoping. It's the families of the people that are having the stuff taken down that we need to manage the communication and like I say, put up a plaque. But yeah, I mean, yes, I'm in a situation where I could definitely suggest things if that's what you're saying, because of the relationships.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Have you had the chance to work with other historical societies, like neighboring communities, for example?
That's a really good question. So I'm part-time, paid a little bit, part-time. And so, and everyone seems very busy, so we don't get together as often as we should. Now, given that we were just at a regional meeting a couple weeks ago where we got to do some sharing, we have some connections with this Pleasant Litchford situation, that may sound bad, Pleasant Litchford opportunity. Hilliard is also rediscovering some of their African American past. Dublin has ties as well, and we're all connected. So in fact, at the, what is it, in October?
Ohio Local History Alliance.
Is it the state meeting? Is
Yeah,
it?
the annual meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna be on a panel together and talk. So there's some, and I've called other historical societies when I've had questions and whatnot, but we really should be doing more than we do.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Kristin.
Sure.
That's great.
We can take this down, right? You'll take it
Yeah,
down.
no, that's
so she
fine.
won't have to-
Yeah. My parents are in Clintonville, and I know they lived in an old house, so I don't think I can get a marker necessarily, but, you know, I can dream,
Not from
right?
us, anyway.
No, unfortunately not. All right, so last but certainly not least, I'd love to introduce the Director of Outreach at the Ohio History Connection, Stacia Kuceyeski. Kuceyeski. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad Kristin went before me because now I can just basically take the outline for her presentation because there is an awful lot of similarities, both in terms of the opportunities and challenges between a local historical organization and where I am. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the Ohio History Connection. I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey and then do some additional, I've been taking some notes of some of the questions that some of you have had, and I've got a little feedback and then an open question. So the Ohio History Connection was founded in 1885, and so we are not a state agency. We are also a private nonprofit 501c3, although we get the majority of our funding from the state, both in terms of general revenue funds and capital dollars. So the capital dollars help us build buildings usually, or long-term exhibits, anything that's has to be there for a minimum of 5 years. We were founded as the Ohio Archaeological Society and then have gone through a variety of name changes. Our most recent one shifted us from the Ohio Historical Society to the Ohio History Connection. So maybe about 5 to 7 years ago. COVID time has really kind of messed up my sense of time. Everything seems much closer than it actually is. So. But we are the state's partner for history. Most states have a state historical society. Some of them are part of the state, like Kentucky Historical Society is a state agency. Some of them are completely independent, like the Connecticut Historical Society, which doesn't get any funding from the state. The ones that are similar to ours are the former Northwest Ordinance Territory states. So us, particularly like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois was similar to us, where we've got all the history is with us, but we aren't actually state agencies. So as part of our organization, we have the Ohio History Center in Ohio Village, which is over at 17th and 71, and that's also the administrative offices for the organization. We have the State Historic Preservation Office, which is where Kristin mentioned having a neighborhood on the National Register. That's something that's managed through the State Historic Preservation Office. And a lot of other states, the SHPO, as we call them, is in some other department as part of the state, but for us, it's with us. And so historic preservation work, tax credits that are available for people who are preserving historic properties, things like that. The center, the village, which is the museum, our flagship museum. Then we have about 58 sites around the state. So depending on where, if you're from Ohio, depending on where you're from, there might be a site around there. Fort Meigs in Perrysburg, Campus Martius in Marietta, the Harriet Beecher Stowe House in Cincinnati, Zoar Village up in Tuscarawas County. So all over that we also manage in partnership with local management partners, but those are our responsibility. And then we have the state archives and library also at the center. So this is pretty much a full service history organization with about 220 staff members. So a little bit about how I got to be standing here in front of all of you today. So I have my undergraduate from Ohio State in history, and my big thing was I was going to go, get my PhD in American history, and then once I got to about my senior year, I was like, oh boy, I cannot do more school. That public history MA was not something that existed when I was here. I also did not do well on my GRE, so that would have been like, so that would have been a great option for me. So I took the GREs, I'm like, I am done, man, with school, I can't do this, I need a break. And my mother, who got her PhD when I was in high school, was like, don't go right away, like give yourself a little bit of time. And so that worked for me. When I was an undergrad, I actually worked part-time with the Ohio Historical Society at the time, processing audio-visual collections in the archive. So I had made some inroads there, had friends who worked there, they knew who I was, that sort of thing. So I graduated, they kept me on full-time because I was gonna go overseas for a year. So I said, peace out Columbus, and spent the year. Well, I went to a program to teach English as a foreign language in Barcelona, and then sort of traveled all around and ended up in Rome for the last half of that year. So I also had a minor in Italian, so that came in helpful when I was gallivanting around on what I lovingly refer to as my lost year. Which I joke, it's like literally, I'm still telling stories from that, and this was like 20 years ago. But I worked on a pub crawl in Rome, I taught English as a language. It was a mess, but it was a lot of fun, and I'm very glad I did that when I did. I don't know if that's the sort of information I'm supposed to be sharing.
No, that's great.
But that's what happened. So, and I wasn't planning on being over there forever or anything, and I was still in contact with folks at OHC, and they're like, oh, we've got, a job that's opened up. So I did an interview for my apartment in Rome, and then came back and then started working there again on Ohio Memory, which is a digitization project. So archives, library, digitization work, and then I moved into education and outreach on some Teaching American History grants, which was a big federal grant program, from about 2000 to 2015-ish, no, 2012, and where we were doing professional development for social studies teachers. So I got really into this idea of how to assist teachers in teaching history, because I know you had the education folks the last time, and historically there's not been a lot of the actual history classes within the education coursework, and so especially Ohio history. So we were really able to highlight what are primary sources, how can you use these primary sources in your classroom to enrich the historical experience for students, how to get these topics that are going to be of more interest potentially to your students than what might just be in the textbook. I don't always like this phrase, but it's really about how can history come alive. So I did that for a while and really just started bebopping my way up. And I've been in this position as a director of outreach for now eight years, which includes all of our education programming, both on-site and outreach, and then all of our community engagement work. So near neighbors, so the Linden Wyland Park community around the center, as well as LGBTQ community, and our immigrant and refugee community, mostly in central Ohio, but also we've got a project in Dayton as well for that. And then I serve on our senior leadership team for the organization as well. So I'm sort of a bit of an anomaly in the field where a lot of people to move up like that from a part-time person processing collections up to a senior leadership role, most people need to move between organizations. You might be as a museum educator, and then you move to be the director of education at another organization, because there are only so much money and there's only so many jobs sometimes within whatever your institution is. But I've been fortunate enough to be able to stay with the same organization now for 20-ish years. And, my background, there's the BA in history, and then when I was working at OHC, I went back and got my master's part-time. I think they've changed the name of it. It was the Cultural Policy and Arts Administration master's program. It was a joint program between the Department of Art Ed and the Glenn School. And that was a really good fit for me because it wasn't just the content, because I wasn't in this content space, I was in more of like an organizational management space. And that was a great master's degree for me, and I would never have thought to look at that if I was going straight out of undergrad. It took me some time to be in like the workforce and realize, oh, that's actually kind of the direction that I'm more interested in, not this really content heavy, which is what I thought I wanted to do because it was all I really understood, curatorial work. That's sort of like the classic thing people think of when they think of museums is people in the collections facility conserving items and things like that, and there's such a richer experience to be had. I mean, even if you're a communications person, marketing, we've got a marketing department, development, the folks who do fundraising. I'm not sure I've met a development person who said, I want to be a development person when they were 19 years old. They've all sort of come into it in some other capacity. Archives library, going to library school, the SHPO office, and then of course classic sort of museum work, curatorial, exhibit development, that sort of thing. But there really is a lot of opportunity in this public history field that isn't just about pushing the content out, there's some of those support systems around it as well, which is really what's kind of, can be fascinating, especially if you've got some other skill sets and interests that you're really into. And then, let's see, undergraduate language. I have used my Italian sporadically when I was working in archives on immigration papers. So depending on if you're if you're like, oh, I am hardcore, I've got my fluency in whatever, I think archives is an interesting place to think of going into around language work, but then also if you're doing pub crawls in Rome, then you can keep the Italians from fighting with the drunk Americans who are on the pub crawl in the language. We have an AmeriCorps program that I want to make sure I tell everyone about. So AmeriCorps, there are two history-based AmeriCorps programs in the country, one in West Virginia and the one that we run in Ohio, where we place AmeriCorps members in local history organizations around the state. So the idea is you're in a host site for half your time, and the other half of the time is spent going out to outreach sites, so other history organizations in your region. And it's a really great opportunity to get that sort of hands-on, a first-hand experience of what the field is like, at least the local history level. So like what Kristin talked about, the sort of, oh, we've got the stuff that we plan and the stuff that comes up and sort of the stuff we have to do. Like, you get the sense of all of the things that can and do happen, but then all of the things that you can actually do. And I think that that's an interesting program to consider if you're thinking about the public histories, the AmeriCorps program. Because, when I don't hire a whole lot of entry-level positions anymore in the position I'm in, but, I will help folks out if they need an interviewer for something. So we were interviewing for a job that we had 70 applications for, and that's a lot to go through. A lot of people with bachelors in histories, like you folks, people with maybe a master's in history, a master's in public history, a master's in education. And, I always look, and there's usually some internships and things like that, but I think really that networking piece is very helpful because there's how are you differentiating yourself amongst the 70 other applicants who might have a resume that looks eerily similar to what you're turning in. The other thing is cover letters. We have, our application system does not require you to upload a cover letter. All you have to upload is a resume. And I said to our HR director, I'm like, what is happening? Why am I not getting cover letters? And she's like, oh, we don't have to do it anymore, blah, 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 whatever. And I was like, this is what helps me make a decision. So, because your resume looks, I don't know if the career people in the corner are like, oh, don't listen to that girl, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But that is what helps me differentiate. I've got two people with almost the exact same resume. This person over here, I can tell, has just written some, you know, what's we're looking for, like standard thing that they've sent to the other 100 places they've applied for. This person over here has picked up on key language that I've used in the position description, and then they've highlighted other things that's not in the resume. You might not put in the resume that you worked for 3 years as a barista at the Starbucks up here, but like in the cover letter, you take your transferable skills. Throughout college, I've worked as a barista, and through that experience, I've really been able to hone my skills in dealing with difficult customers, and I see how that translates X, Y, and Z. Now that's a cover letter that I'm like, oh, this person's paid attention to what we're asking for. And that's why I feel like cover letters are one of those things, it's like the unsung hero of the job market, because it makes such a difference in trying to sift through a lot of applications that at times start to look very similar. Let's see. And I will just reiterate what Kristin had said about opportunities. I know when I was working at then OHC, both part-time when I was in college, but even when I was working in my first full-time job there, whenever there were opportunities available, I would take them just to learn something new, meet some new people, and kind of get a sense of what it was I wanted to do. Because I worked with people who knew going into undergrad, I want to be the director of a history museum. And they have not wavered from that goal. And I was never quite like that. I enjoyed history and I liked being around it. And I liked what I thought it could do. But to turn that into a job, I didn't know what that looked like. And so I think taking advantage of those opportunities is really important, because you do start to shift and change throughout. I see it in my career too, more of a focus on the stuff, and then more of a focus then on more of a public history, like teaching people how to use the stuff, but about the history. And then really now I'm moving more towards this, more of my work is in organizational development. How to make the Ohio History Connection the best organization it can be. What's my role in helping support my staff and elevate them so they can move on to find their dream jobs. So, it shifts throughout your career. So having that is, all those experiences to draw on is helpful, and it makes you a more interesting, well-rounded person just in general, I think. So, any questions about either my stuff, Ohio History Connection stuff, or I suppose anything for the three of us? I don't want to take Sam's job here, facilitating the end conversation. But. Yes?
So you mentioned that you were originally thinking about doing your PhD when you were an undergrad, and you were encouraged to spend a little more time to figure out what you wanted to do.
By my mother.
Yes.
I mean, as you
Yes,
talk to your
moms
mom.
are great. Us moms are good.
When you were spending more time in undergrad, was this the period you were abroad, or did you sort of take different classes and sort of get a different sense of what you want to do while still in undergrad?
Yeah,
how'd you spend
sure.
your time?
That's a good question. Let me try to go back in time here. Yeah, it would have probably been when I was getting ready to start my senior year, when I was like, I can't do school, and that's when my mom was like, don't force it, go do something else. But I will say that during that time, I always took some off classes, things that made sense. The School of Architecture used to have a series of 3 historic preservation courses, the history of architecture, and I took those just because I thought, why not? I think it counted towards the major. And I was like, that looks like fun. And then fashion merchandising had a history of costume and textiles class that was amazing. It was actually really kind of easy if you're a history person, because it just kind of made sense, because it was the history. And then the change in fashion over time, which is basically based on the changes in social mores, right? But they've got an amazing collection at the, at their facility. I can't remember what it's called. So I took a class like that, right? So in history was something a little bit different, which was sort of fun. But then at that point, it was more like I just needed a break. Yeah, because I wanted to stay with the history stuff, but I just couldn't keep doing the schoolwork. So if you're in that situation too, it's okay, you can,
We'll make it.
yeah, you'll make it. Anybody else have any questions? Cool, thank you.
Let's give her a round of applause. And once again, now that it seems like we're wrapping up here, let's just give one big final round of applause for all of our wonderful speakers and presenters. Thank you guys so much. It's so great to have you here. Is
I'm gonna
there?
give you this, so you have my email.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
You can send it.
I'll make this available to everyone. I think this is it, guys. I think if there's nothing else that I'm forgetting or haven't addressed yet.
Tell people to sign in.
Yes, we have, and this is the final time of the semester. We've been saying it all year. Please sign in our attendance sheet if you were here. It goes a long way. It helps us keep track of everything. And if there is truly nothing else, I'm sure I'll see some of you between now and then. But if in case I don't, have an excellent summer. Thank you guys for your engagement all year long. It's been a long year, and I'll see you guys around.